So this is Rick Harnish. I'm the executive director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. We are a nonprofit advocacy organization funded by our members. And our role is to connect the people who want trains, whether modern trains, whether it be true high-speed trains running at 220 miles an hour or the connecting fixed or mixed-use lines. We believe in an integrated network where they all work together, and that governments need to plan the networks together in order to demonstrate the benefits of each segment in a much more robust way, which makes the whole thing work. Build a stronger political coalition and a stronger business case for a big federal program to build fast, frequent, and affordable trains across the country. Currently, we are working on what we would like the Biden administration to do in its first days. We would like to see a high-speed rail project actually get completed in his first term. So that could be either Texas or Las Vegas to Los Angeles, or the first segment of Los Angeles to San Francisco. Would like to see trains actually running at 110 in Illinois within the next several years during his term. And let's finish both those, the Chicago to St. Louis and Chicago to Detroit corridors. But more importantly, let's get real robust planning going for a national network of trains, including better long distance service and high-speed rail. Illinois has been a leader in this field for a long time. We're very happy of our members' roles in making this projects in Illinois continue to grow. It was a very solid bipartisan downstate, upstate coalition that led to additional frequencies in 2006 that made it possible for us to find in this state over $2 billion for infrastructure funds. And these projects are making progress. And so I have Scott Speegle here today from the Illinois Department of Transportation to talk about what that progress is, what the next steps are, and hopefully a little bit of what we can do to help expedite the process. Today we will, if you have a question, feel free to ask it at any time in the Q&A period or in the Q&A box. And then I will ask those questions after the initial presentation is done. So thank you very much, Scott, for joining us, and you go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Rick. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk with you and the group about the status of passenger rail service and projects here in Illinois currently and into the future. I wanted to start with the current situation we've got with our operations, Amtrak Operations, given the COVID-19 pandemic, and give you folks an idea of what we've done and what the future looks like as far as dealing with that. As you know, right now, and since late March, our service levels were reduced in a decision that was made jointly with Amtrak to about half of the normal levels of service for our state-supported trains. We're running one daily round trip between Chicago and Quincy and Chicago and Carbondale, as opposed to two normally. And then we're running two daily round trips between Chicago and St. Louis on the Lincoln service, down from 4 round trips normally. This was done for a variety of reasons, safety being primary, and making sure that passengers on the trains were not we're able to socially distance, and we work closely with Amtrak to monitor that. We also are a funding partner for the Hiawatha trains between between Chicago and Milwaukee, and those are currently running at 4 round trips a day as opposed to the normal 7. For a period of time in April and June, they stopped service. They were busing, but they've bounced that back up, or we've bounced that back up in conjunction with WISDOT. One of the things that we look for and are looking at on a regular basis, we are in communication with Amtrak multiple times a week, weekly calls between Amtrak and state partners across the country, and then we have close contact with the folks here in the Midwest, here in Chicago, looking at what the situation is, what ridership's like, what would be needed to do to run trains safely and to resume our normal levels of service. At the moment, there are no hard plans to resume service, and obviously the news of the last few weeks with regard to the pandemic have not been good. So I don't think that we should anticipate any increase back to normal levels of service, certainly not in the foreseeable future. Right now, some of the assumptions that were made in terms of the contracts between the state and Amtrak for our service were that April 1st would be the earliest that we would consider resuming service. However, we are also monitoring that and cognizant of the fact that this is not a decision that can be made on a dime. We, in consultation with Amtrak, would need to have a certain amount of lead time in advance to be sure that they had staffing and equipment and so on. So we continue to monitor the situation. Right now, our ridership compared to a year ago, this same month a year ago, is running about 25 to 30% of what it was a year ago. We did have the CARES Act funding, which was very helpful to Illinois and other state partners, as well as to Amtrak. We are still receiving some of that funding, or Amtrak is, and working with Amtrak on that. That is set to run out. The amount of money that was given for helping state-supported service will be running out at the end of this calendar year, so in another month or so. But it was very helpful in keeping within our budgets, and we do expect to be able to fully support our train service for this current fiscal year and into the next, with the appropriations that we have from the state in terms of that. We want to, when it makes sense, we want to get back to full service, but the costs and the safety of the passengers is something that we are continuously monitoring. So we will work with Amtrak, and as soon as we're able to make those decisions, we'll get that information out about the resumption of regular levels of service. So let me move on now to some information about the various rail projects we've got going, and it's an exciting time to be in rail in Illinois. We've got multiple projects going on that will expand the reach of passenger rail to parts of the state that haven't been served in a long time. And when the projects are completed, we will be covering the vast majority of the state of Illinois geographically and population center-wise. Will be either on a train line or in a relatively short travel time to get to a train station. So our big project that's been going on for many years is the Chicago to St. Louis high-speed rail project. The vast majority, and this isn't anything new, but the vast majority of the infrastructure work along the corridor, basically between Joliet and south of Alton, which is the part of the corridor that we've made improvements, is done. We are continuing to work on the one last segment that needs some improvements in the Midway National Forest area, National Prairie area, and south of Joliet. We have been making progress on that and hope to be able to complete the environmental work within the next year or so, and then be able to proceed with the final construction that's needed to improve that area. We are currently in very active working with our partners, FRA and the Union Pacific and Amtrak, on increasing the speeds on the corridor up to 90 miles per hour, the maximum speed up to 90 miles per hour as an intermediate step on the way towards 110. All our partners are very committed to that and getting that done as quickly as possible, and we anticipate that finally being able to occur in the first half of 2021, where we would be able to get the final signaling and XITCS systems all working together properly so that we can get this speed up to 90. We are still committed, and as our FRA and Union Pacific, to getting up to 110 as quickly as we can. We don't have a time frame at this point, but we are continuing to have dialogue with UP and the FRA on what's needed to get the speeds up to 110. We hope to have those discussions increase in specificity as we reach the milestone of hitting the 90 miles per hour early next year, and then begin the more specific work on getting that done. So that's where the high-speed rail project stands at this moment. We're happy with the safety improvements and the passenger convenience, the new stations along the corridor, which now most have been open for a few years. We prior to the pandemic and the ridership problems that we've encountered, and Amtrak in general has encountered, our ridership was up on that corridor. So we think that we're making progress on that. With regard to the Quad Cities project, we are in very active discussions and negotiations with the host railroad, the Iowa Interstate Railroad, which we will need to make improvements to the corridor between Moline and Wyanett, where it connects on up to the BNSF, the current Quincy corridor. Those negotiations and discussions on preliminary engineering and the improvements that are required to bring that segment of the corridor up to passenger rail standards are ongoing, and we hope to reach that agreement on that, as well as construction and maintenance agreements soon. Fortunately, until those agreements are reached and we are able to determine the scope of the improvements that are needed, we're not able to, at this time, give a time frame for when service might begin. The plan at that time is to, in addition to the stops along on the BNSF Quincy corridor, would be an extra stop in Geneseo, as well as, and then the final stop in Moline. They'll be running 2 round trips per day, one in each direction in the morning and one in each direction in the evening. So that's the plan for the Quad Cities project. Rockford, we're restoring passenger rail service out to Rockford. We have a prime consultant, WSP, under contract, and we've begun outreach to the host railroads that would be involved, which are Metra and the Union Pacific, to determine, again, the improvements that are needed to bring that corridor back up to passenger rail levels. Most of the work would be done between Elgin, where the Metra currently ends, and Rockford. Obviously, there would need to be a connection between those corridors at that point. And once we're able to reach agreement with UP and Metra on the what's needed, we will begin preliminary engineering and final design and construction, with a goal to getting that done as quickly as possible. The current plan is to run 2 round trips per day between Chicago and Rockford, with intermediate stops in Elgin, Hundley, and Belvedere along the UP corridor. And it would be run on the Metra tracks between Union Station and Elgin. The Carbondale, part of the Rebuild Illinois capital program signed over a little over a year ago. There was $100 million designated to make improvements to the Chicago to Carbondale corridor with the CN, which is the host railroad. The goal of those projects and that the money, it would be to improve the corridor on-time performance by improving the flow, including, sidings where necessary, perhaps some double track sections where meets are frequently made between trains. Obviously, a shared use corridor, and so dealing with freight as well as passenger rail. We have begun preliminary discussions. We've got our prime consultant, Quandl Consultants, under contract now, and we have begun analyzing the corridor to determine where best that it would be needed, those improvements would be needed, as well as discussing with the host railroad, the CN, on their cooperation and participation in those types of projects. We, again, with these last 3 projects, the Quad Cities, Rockford, and Carbondale, we hope to have announcements out to the public in terms of what's needed, when, and what, with more specificity on timeframes in 2021, hopefully as early as possible, but I'm not able to commit at this time to a specific dates on that. And then the last thing I wanted to update the group on is our rail car procurement and the coming new venture rail cars that Siemens has produced for us, or is producing, I should say, for us. Production is ongoing. Been a few minor effects from the pandemic, but nothing major in terms of our schedule. The first 13 of those cars are actually in Chicago in the yard at Union Station. There's another 5 which will be on their way from Sacramento, where they're being produced in this month sometime. And the schedule over the next couple of years is anticipated to be 4 per month arriving here in Chicago, for a total of 88 new rail cars. 54 of those cars are going to be coach cars. 17 of them will be business/coach cars, and 17 of them will be cafe/coach cars. Those for a total of 88. Those cars are due to be tested and get into revenue service. The testing should happen by the end of this current calendar year, with the revenue service at early part of 21. The initial cars will be run on the Lincoln Service trains. The cafe cars and will not be delivered until beginning in 2022. So the initial consists on the Lincoln Service will be the 4 coach cars with the legacy cafe business class car. But once we get the cafe cars and the business class cars, we'll be working those in. Once they start running on Lincoln Service, all the new train cars as they arrive will be burned in on the Chicago to St. Louis corridor. So once we make the switch over to the new venture cars, the Lincoln Service will be running exclusively the new venture cars and not any of the legacy Horizon or cars. That schedule, and then as they burn in on the Lincoln Service corridor, then they will begin to be distributed out to the various corridors in the Midwest, the others in Illinois, the Michigan corridors, and the River Runner in Missouri, with an eye also towards the need for additional cars on the new corridors that we plan to be opening up here in Illinois. So the final delivery of the new train sets of all 88 cars is scheduled for 2023. So we've got a few years, but production is going well, and we're very excited. We look to have those cars into revenue service on the Lincoln Service trains in early 2021. That's my update. I think, Rick, you asked for 15. I gave you 20.
That's fine.
And happy to take some questions now.
So I think the primary question, kind of looking through here, is kind of synthesizing. So I think I have enough knowledge to be dangerous. So what is the reason that we have to have 90 miles an hour first and then 110? And what kind of technical issues have there been in terms of getting even to 90?
Well, in terms of the why 90 first, decision was made a number of years ago to make that intermediate jump in speed, to make sure that the systems worked. When the high-speed rail project began, PTC and these signaling systems were all more conceptual than reality, and there's been a number of stops and starts across the country with different systems. we made some decisions that that we've needed to stick with for budget reasons, and so we decided to make that first intermediate stop at 90, or intermediate step, I should say, to 90. In terms of the technical need or the technical details, I freely admit I'm not an engineer, so I know that they're working. There's been a number of tests that have been done. It's a system, that complicated system of with interoperability with different train lines that use the UP corridor, making sure that everything's talking to each other. And I believe there's been some glitches in terms of making sure that everything's working properly, that Amtrak and UP and Alstom, who's the contractor and doing the technical work, are working on diligently.
So I think, so can you explain what EITMS is and what its role is and what XITCS is, or is that beyond your knowledge, Sam?
That's beyond my scope, I'll be honest with you.
Okay. So we, California did a statewide plan where they actually went out 15, 20 years, and they created a statewide integrated rail plan where they actually put together schedules of, so they could plan how the routes interacted with each other. And then from that, build a ridership model that showed how passengers would interact with each segment. We've advocated for that for Illinois to do that for a couple of years. Are you aware of any progress on getting that started?
In terms of planning on, I'm not sure I quite understand what you're asking.
So let me ask it a different way. Where is the state in terms of the next level? The state has to redo its rail plan every once in a while. I think it's every 4 years. Where are we at in that cycle?
I think the last rail plan was done in 2018, I believe, 2018. So I think we're in the middle of that 4 or 5 year. I think it's every 5 years. Okay. The rail plan is available. The current rail plan is available on the Idot website. I don't think we're at a point where we're beginning to look at that again, to update it, and probably not for another couple of years. Okay.
And can you comment at all on what's happening at Union Station 1 with the serious upgrades that need to be happening there with the platforms, et cetera, and where that's at with Amtrak and Metra?
That's a Amtrak and Metra issue. I'm not I'm not representing either entity, so I'm not going to comment on that one.
Okay. And so you talked about Rockford. I think there's about to be a study of extending that to Dubuque. Can you comment on that?
Sure. The study is looking at what would be the best possible way to extend the service beyond Rockford out to Dubuque, being led by the Dubuque Metropolitan Area Transportation Study, and it's being done by the NPOs out there, municipal planning organizations. IDOT is involved through our Office of Programming and Planning, and it's basically looking at what the options are to extend the service beyond Rockford. We've gotten the green light and the money to get the service out to Rockford, but beyond that, it requires further study. That's beginning at this point.
Yeah, if I can just put my opinion in, for Rockford, I think it's not worth starting if there aren't at least 5 trains a day. We really need to figure out how to make that frequent, especially on how short it is. And similarly, to go to Dubuque, I think without 1 or 2 or 3 trains a day. We've kind of seen that with the Quad Cities, where the idea was, well, we'll get 2 trains a day started, you know, like by 2011, 2012, and then we'll figure out how to get more. I think we need to think about how to get to a much more robust state in the first phase.
Well, as I'm sure you know, the original plan on the Quad Cities was actually to extend out into Iowa City and beyond. Unfortunately, the folks in Iowa decided they didn't want to pursue the extension beyond the Quad Cities. And we're obviously very committed to getting the Quad Cities part done, because if it doesn't get to the Quad Cities, it doesn't get into Iowa at all at some point in the future if they decide to do that. Just like if the trains don't get to Rockford first, they're not going to get out to Dubuque.
Right, exactly, right. And then, so I know the initial planning work was done for Dubuque or Des Moines. You know, there's a commuter rail effort underway for Cedar Rapids to Iowa City. So in this next integrated network approach that we're talking about, you know, maybe Cedar Rapids and some sort of connecting service up there is, in, again, my opinion, not necessarily asking for IDOT's view. Maybe we should be talking about Cedar Rapids as a first phase as well. On a similar vein, there's been work on getting 10 trains a day to Milwaukee. What's the, you may have already discussed it, but what's the status on that? And has there been talk in IDOT about really working with UP and CP to figure out a way to consolidate freight on one line so that you could have a dedicated passenger main and a dedicated freight main, basically a couple of miles away from each other?
Well, in terms of the increased frequencies between Chicago and Milwaukee, that project or that proposed increase in service is being led by the Wisconsin DOT. Illinois has been a partner in that study, but at this point we're really kind of out of that in terms of active participation. We ran into some opposition in some of our communities on the North Shore, and the decision was made to let Wisconsin go forward if they could, but not be an active participant. In terms of looking at combining freight, I don't believe there's been any major discussions on that or a major look. The freight improvements are largely falling under the auspices of the CREATE program, and as far as I know, that's not part of that at this point.
Okay. What do you plan on advertising to get ridership back as people feel more comfortable with traveling? Is there an advertising budget for that?
Yes, we do. And yes, there is a budget. We work closely with Amtrak to align our, obviously we have a kind of a built-in advantage here in Illinois that, Chicago is a major hub for Amtrak nationally. And so we benefit from advertising, the advertising dollars that Amtrak spends in the Chicago market. The advertising that we do and will continue to do tends to be focused more on downstate communities. And we've more recently gotten into the digital and social media, using those platforms for advertising. We're currently in the planning phase for our advertising spending and plan for 2021. It is tied, the timing of it is tied with how the service, resumption of service happens when we get back up to our normal levels of frequencies. We do plan on, I think, skewing our spend on advertising to happen at the same time that service is getting back up. We have continued to do some advertising through the pandemic months, focusing as Amtrak is nationally on the safety of the trains and the steps that Amtrak takes to help keep passengers safe.
Excellent. Oh, and then there was an add-on to that. Yes, we would offer our whatever help we can provide in getting that word out about the safety now and about the service coming back. We will offer our whatever help we can provide with that.
Thank you.
To the other question. Lance Turnstall asked a question about the Northeast Corridor. We will be doing a program on the Northeast Corridor as soon as we can. There aren't really any plans to get the Northeast Corridor to 220. In a lot of ways, I believe the first ones are going to be out west just because of the density that you have on the Northeast Corridor and the issues you have with bringing that up to a state of good repair. And we talked about Iowa Interstate. We have promoted pretty heavily a concept called Crossrail Chicago, which brings together, and again, this integrated network approach that we have, where you take multiple markets, multiple projects, and put them together so that they all make more sense together. In Crossrail Chicago, we proposed big upgrades to Metro Electric in order to run that more like a transit service, doing similar upgrades, which is a much bigger lift on the line that goes out to the Metro line that goes to the airport. And then a connection between that North Central line and the Milwaukee, or the, I'm sorry, under pressure, Metro Electric line, connecting them through Union Station so that downstate trains, preferably electrified, so somebody could get on a train in Bloomington and take it through Union Station if they wanted and go to O'Hare. And, you know, or Champaign or any of the other places like that. We got it to the point where it's mentioned twice in the regional plan. Can you comment any more on whether there's any planning on that sort of concept or not?
Well, in general, maybe I can make a general comment about planning and our staffing and so on here at Idot. And one of the challenges for us is that the rail staff is relatively small. I think you total it up less than well, about 10, 12 people that are, and we are seeking to deliver a number of fairly large projects, both on the passenger side that we've talked about, as well as new cars, and then there's the whole CREATE program and our involvement in CREATE freight rail. So while we are open to plans and we've got quite a bit that we're working on right now, and trying to get what we've got in the pipeline implemented as quickly as possible. And obviously, we're aware that folks in some of these communities have been waiting for quite a while, and we're hoping to deliver that as quickly as possible. So, in terms of planning right now, our focus is on delivery and getting the projects that are in the pipeline currently delivered as quickly as we can. It's not to say we don't look at planning, and the rail plan that comes out every few years, as you mentioned earlier, is part of that process. But right at this moment, we're pretty focused on being able to deliver the projects we've got already.
We have made a little bit of progress recently on it. One is that Cook County is working with Metra to, in the initial first small step, change the fare structure of Metro Electric and Rock Island in order, hopefully, as a first step to attract more riders. But they're looking for a full integration between CTA, PACE, and Metro Electric and Metro Rock Island. That's their ultimate goal. So that's one step in the right direction. We were also very happy that Metra has promoted the idea of them running a shuttle train from downtown to O'Hare. We think that's a great big step. With the current change, and especially with Moody's saying recently that they're very concerned about the debt load that would come about as a result of expanding O'Hare, we really believe the city needs to figure out how to get trains right into Terminal 2, which would be part of this idea.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a website or anywhere that the passenger rail projects that Amtrak and Metro are working on, are they consolidated in any place, or is there a way that people can follow up on those more?
No, there's not one. Well, there's an IllinoisPassengerRail.org website, which has some information and is kind of a clearinghouse. The Idot website, and then the individual projects. Obviously, the Chicago to St. Louis has its own standalone website. We plan on launching websites for the Quad Cities and Rockford web projects as soon as we're able to nail down kind of the preliminary engineering and the agreements and so on with the different host railroads and entities. So we expect during the next year to be launching Quad Cities and Rockford websites, standalone websites.
Oh, excellent.
Which will have information on the projects and where things stand and so on.
Okay.
Timelines. Once all that information is determined, we're working with our outside consultants to get that information put out on the web as quickly as possible.
Excellent.
But the schedule is being determined by the engineering, the progress of the engineering, and the progress of the preliminary engineering.
Okay. And for the Rockford service, you mentioned the stops and I missed. Is there one near or kind of close to O'Hare on the proposed stops to Rockford?
Well, the stops would be Elgin, Huntley, Belvedere, and Rockford.
Okay. Elgin's not very close.
Yeah.
And let's see here. So there were a couple of questions about stuff that touch Illinois, but other states have led. So like the south of the lake reroute. Are you aware of what the status is on doing any planning for a new dedicated passenger main out of Chicago to the east, in particular Detroit?
I'm sorry, to where?
To the east. So there's kind of like this
the
funnel around the south of the lake for Detroit and Cleveland and Columbus.
Right. I know there have been some planning, some studying done several years ago. led by other state agents or other states' DOTs, not Illinois, although we've been participated in them. I think at this point, I'm not aware of any progress that's being made on any of those. I think there were some funding problems, and there's
Okay.
money needed for planning has not been available.
Yeah, it's one of the most important things for the national network, and yet because it's largely in Indiana, and the states that benefit the most, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio, it's been very difficult to keep that alive and moving.
Yeah.
A similar thing, the second train a day to the Twin Cities, and the little baby builder.
Wisconsin and Minnesota DOTs are leading that. I do think I don't have any real specific information about it, but I do believe that they've recently gotten some grants, won some competitive grants to make some of the improvements needed. And as far as I know, that project is progressing. I don't know exactly what the current status and what they're looking at as far as any more funding and improvements needed, but that again is a Wisconsin DOT is the lead on that.
Okay. Have we seen any negative effect? You know, I am still incredibly angry that Amtrak has done such great damage to the long distance network by dropping it to 3 times a week. Have we noticed in Illinois, on the Illinois trains, a negative impact on either ridership or the cost of providing service?
In terms of ridership's been pretty flat over the last couple months. So I don't think we've seen any. It's flat, but much lower, obviously, than we would like and it previously had. Ridership cratered out in March and April, and then has kind of steadily increased up to, as I said, we're running about 25 to 30% in terms of normal ridership. The change from Amtrak, and I'm not going to, that was a decision Amtrak made, and Illinois was not involved in that, so I'm not going to really comment on that decision to do that. We are not paying anything additional. That went into effect in October 1, so it's still a little bit early to determine if there's been a major effect on ridership. We actually felt that rather than hurting our state-supported service, it actually might help our state-supported service in that the days that the long-distance trains aren't running on our corridors, people would still need to get places, and we might see an increase in ridership. We haven't realized that yet or seen that really yet. I don't think there's been quite enough time to make a final determination on that, but we haven't really noticed any major changes yet.
Okay. There are lots of questions, so I want to make sure we see if there's a pattern here that we're not covering, or this is an interesting one. Is there any coordination between Idot and the Railroad Engineering Center at U of I in Champaign?
From time to time, they've done some studies for us and looked at some questions that we've had. I don't think there's any formal coordination between the two entities. It's a great resource. I've been down there and seen what they've got, and it's a great resource that we've got here in the state of Illinois. But they have done some studies at different times through the years for us, I know, and they would continue to be a place we would turn to if we needed the other things.
Okay. I know they did for Idot in around 2011, 2012, they did an initial feasibility study for a 200-mile-an-hour line.
Right.
And basically showed it works. The challenge is we couldn't do the follow-up study on how to phase it or how to finance it. Yeah. And in the study range, there was discussions during the Capitol bill debate about doing a feasibility study for Peoria. And I've lost track of how that went. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, well, how it went is we're beginning that
Okay.
study. It's not in any, it's not been completed, so there's no results yet, but we are looking at that.
So again, and to sometimes getting an idea out is to be a broken record. In the integrated network concept, there's a lot of folks that would like regional service along the Illinois River, Morris, LaSalle, Peru, etc. If you combine those two together, maybe it starts to make a lot more sense moving forward. Richard Martin is asking, can the current equipment run at 110 miles an hour?
Yes.
Okay. And similar to the out-of-state questions, is Illinois involved at all in the upgrades on Chicago to Detroit and working to get that route finished and up to 110?
No, we're not directly involved in that, no.
Okay.
We are, the states, the Midwest states, partly as a driver because of the new equipment, are working together on a more regional basis. Certainly branding, we're branding things as Amtrak Midwest and we have made some schedule changes in order to make transitions through Union Station better. And so there is coordination work being done amongst the Midwest states to try to improve service and as much as possible make accommodations or changes to increase ridership that would be more regional. So like you were saying, coming from Ann Arbor to get to Kansas City through Illinois and, making sure that those connections would be, or that with an eye to making those connections better, things like that.
Excellent. Let's see here. I'm kind of answering Lance's question. In the original Midwest Regional Rail Initiative concept, there was talk about 90-mile-an-hour service to Carbondale. Has anything progressed with that?
No.
Okay. And then Brent is asking, when does the Chicago to St. Louis corridor get faster? I guess the answer to that, well, let me ask his exact question. Did the St. Louis schedule quickening get addressed yet in this discussion?
we plan to increase the speeds to 90 miles per hour in the first half or so of 2021. There will be at that time a schedule change to reflect the increased speeds. So changes, the schedules will adjust. Obviously, one of the challenges that we've also found is that, with the pandemic and so much in question as far as what the market will bear in terms of train passengers and so on. It hasn't stopped our planning or stopped our progress, but it's thrown a wrinkle in things that, to be honest, unless somebody on Rick, you or somebody else on the discussion can tell me when the pandemic's going to end, which I know nobody can, that is a question that kind of looms over all of our operations and projects and planning, and I don't know how that may affect down the road, in what ways any of these, any of our either our current situation or our future hoped for. We don't anticipate any major problems because of that, but it does throw a wrinkle in our plans.
Yeah, it was very frustrating that, knowing that the testing for 90 was supposed to start in the summer and it had to be put on hold because you couldn't have a bunch of people in the cab.
Right.
Yeah. What I think we should do is have those full gas mask style things that, for when you're in the trenches in World War I, and then we can just move about freely.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes we have a hard enough time getting people to wear masks. I'm not sure if gas masks would be any easier.
I actually saw a picture of a guy on it. So somebody took a picture as they were getting into a plane where it only had a couple of people on the plane, and one of them actually had one of those on.
Really? Yeah.
It was a long distance flight, so it would have been uncomfortable. We're just 2 minutes away, so let me go through all the big questions here, long list, and see if there's any really important that we've missed. So I think we've got close to hitting most of these. We've got some feedback from Mark Rowland that, maybe we should think about a different schedule out of St. Louis, since it's a 13-hour gap between the 4:30 departure a.m. and the 5 o'clock departure. And I guess building on that, have there been discussions about refiguring that, if it's just going to be 2 times a day, reconfiguring that schedule?
Oh, you mean which trains are currently running the two trips a day?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's been any active discussions. If there's a reason that it would make sense, I think we'd be open to that and discussing that with Amtrak. That those decisions are made in conjunction, the two of us, 2 entities, Amtrak and Idot. And I certainly, I wouldn't rule anything out, but I don't believe that that's been discussed currently. I think the schedule as it stands probably will be what it is until we are able to move back up to 4 round trips or our full levels of service.
I have to put this in. My opinion is the next step is 6 trains a day. Let's forget about doing 4. Let's go straight to 6.
All right. Well, I'll take that back.
Excellent. Well, we're at 1 o'clock. I really appreciate you being on. If there's anything we missed that you think we should cover, give you a chance to say something. Other than that, thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciated the opportunity, and you know, I think the bottom line, I would just like to wrap up by saying, you know, Idot is very committed to rail as a mode, and making many improvements as we can. Obviously, there are some limitations to what we can do, but we are very committed to improving the rail system here in Illinois, and maintaining what we've got, and making improvements where we can. And I look forward to working together with your group, Rick, and other advocacy groups on behalf of rail.
Excellent, thank you. And for those on the line, if you liked this, this was helpful to you, please go to hsrail.org and hit that donate button. And thank you all for being here, and thanks again, Scott, for joining.